Ween's White Pepper was released on May 2nd in the year 2000, produced by Ween and Christopher Shaw at Bearsville Studios in Woodstock, New York. This is Ween's seventh studio album. It's known as one of Ween's more accessible albums. It still has a lot of the quirky stuff that goes on with Ween, but fans consider it less brown. We'll talk about what in the world that means. And then talk about how this Ween album differs from some of the other albums, why the band took a different approach with White Pepper. And to do all of this, I've got my buddy, Josh Best, up in God's country in South Central Kentucky. How you doing, man? You excited to talk about some Ween today?
I am excited. I'm doing great. How are you doing?
I'm doing fantastic because I've spent the last 2 to 3 weeks just enmeshed in the world of Ween, and it's been too long since I've done a deep dive on Ween, but I used to listen to them all the time. I found them around the time of White Pepper. My buddy and your buddy too, Steve Reed, introduced me to Ween. It's nice to have a guide to introduce you to Ween because it goes so deep. Their world goes so deep. And you and I have history, going back to not too long after this album came out, seeing Ween. So I'm really excited to be talking about this album. It's been a blast, prepping for this.
Yeah, I'm glad. I'm glad this was one of your picks. I'm glad you picked to do this because I don't know how it happened, but I would say for maybe the last, I don't know, 15 years, I just forgot Ween existed. And that is so sad. we were we were talking about somebody and you said their contemporary is Ween, and I was like, "Oh my gosh, have I just forgot that that band existed?" And so I'm so glad that we're discussing this album because I've had fun the last couple of weeks filling my rotation with Ween.
Man, me too. And my rationale for wanting to talk about this with you is it's not just because this is Ween's most accessible album. I think that's true. That's the first thing that people say about this, and I think there's no other way to think of it other than that. But this was this is the Ween album that was their most recent album when I got into them. So it kind of has I have a kind of personal connection to it as sort of my gateway into Ween. But I wanted to talk about this album because it just holds up on its own merit. Even removed from Ween's legacy, it has nothing to do with the rest of Ween's albums. I just think it's one of the greatest albums of the decade. And I don't know, listening to it the last couple of weeks, I can confidently say I think this is one of the greatest pop rock records that's ever been made. And it still retains enough of Ween's insanity to set it apart from other great albums. Am I going too far? Is that hyperbolic? Is that too much of an exaggeration to say that about White Pepper?
I don't think so. I totally agree. Um, yeah, and it's so crazy that there's probably lots of music fans out there who've never heard of Ween.
People who like Ween are obsessed with Ween, and beyond that, it's kind of it's like a bubble. It's like a Ween bubble. And man, if your life's work could be getting people outside of that bubble to appreciate what Ween has done, I think that would be an effort that's well worth it. I think White Pepper showcases Ween's range, is a strength of a lot of Ween's albums, is just how diverse their sound can be, but it's really pronounced on White Pepper. And the album title, White Pepper, a mix of the White Album and Sgt. Pepper's, so two iconic Beatles albums. I think it highlights the love that these guys have for the Beatles. Beatles, my favorite band of all time. Dean Ween will unabashedly say they're the greatest band ever, and I agree with them there. So as a big Beatles fan, I think it's a fitting name. I think that they do it justice. I'm not saying that White Pepper is the equivalent of those albums necessarily, but those records, it belongs in the pantheon of great albums. But man, the last couple weeks to prep for this album, I've also listened to some of the stuff that came before it. Obviously, I was familiar with those albums. I love, Mollusk and Chocolate and Cheese. And then of course, the Brown trilogy and all of that. And just to set the stage, Brown in Ween lore just means just go listen to the first three Ween albums, and you're going to get a sense of what Brown means. It's really they can't really describe what it means, but just go check out like early Ween, and you're going to get a sense of what it means. It just means all of the insanity that Ween can offer listeners. But man, I think one of my favorite parts of doing this was watching the live albums, like especially any live show, really. But like that live in Chicago, maybe I'm on a high on that right now because I've just been in this world for 2 or 3 weeks straight. But like, I can't think of a live album that I like more than Ween live in Chicago. Like, it is amazing. I hope you've had a chance to dive into the live Ween world because it is something special.
Yeah. Yeah, I watched that live in Chicago video. First of all, thank God for technology because
Yeah.
we can literally attend concerts past and present and never leave our couch, and that's the way to attend a concert. I mean,
Yeah. Right.
obviously, sitting on my couch 22 years later or 21 years later, it's not the same as being there in the moment, but gosh, what a live performance, and Gene Ween is one of my favorite frontmen of all time, and just I get stuck, I mean, just staring at him because it's like, what is he gonna do next? And it's nothing like crazy, like bite off a bat's head or squirt blood on their face, but um, just his facial expressions and how he gets into the song, it's just incredible. And Dean's the same way. I just love watching him play guitar because he looks like he's having so much fun. They're just a great band live.
Speaking of which, the first time I saw Ween live was with you, and it was in June of 2002 at the very first Bonnaroo, which I don't know if I mean I remember it's been a long time, and boy, it was a hot like if you've ever been to Bonnaroo, you know how like messy and hot it can get. But that first one, it was raw. Like they don't know what they're doing. They don't have like crowd control is not a thing. Do you clearly do you remember the first Bonnaroo?
Gosh, I feel like, I mean, I can't go through the itinerary of the weekend and say, this is what we did this day, but there's some things that I will never forget. I mean, just things burn in my memory, like spending 14 hours on a interstate going 10 miles in 14 hours, which was overnight. We spent the night on the interstate. I was 20 years old. So all the footage and stuff I'd watched at Woodstock, I mean, watched about Woodstock, it was like, "Oh, cool. This is like my Woodstock," because like you said, that first one, they didn't know what they were doing. There was no control over drugs, and it was just lawless, just a free for all. I remember the people that we caravanned with, all of them were super excited about Ween. And I was like I was like just learning about Ween. So I definitely remember that Ween show because everybody that was around us was super excited about going, and I mean, and I was too, and I remember the show just being fantastic.
Dude, it was so wild to see them in person after like really getting to know them. And then I saw Ween again, and I realized now, like researching for this, it was on. I had to look this up. There's no way I would have recalled this, but it was on April 30th, 2003, at the Tennessee Theater in Knoxville. I drove down from Lexington. I was with Steve, and man, it was amazing. It was like just a few months before they recorded that Live in Chicago set, which I think that was released in 2004 on DVD, and then there's just there's the audio version too. But so I guess it would have been, I think they recorded it maybe in November of 2003. So it was just a few months. It was probably a pretty similar set to what they played in Live in Chicago, and both times like at Bonnaroo, and it just really blew my mind. So you can't really talk about Ween without like understanding a little bit about them. A lot of people watching this, they probably know what's going on, and they know the history of Ween. So I won't belabor the point here, but I do think it's important to set the stage a little bit. Our friends Aaron Freeman and Mickey Melchiondo, known as Gene and Dean Ween, met in middle school in typing class. Gene says he was more of a trench coat kind of a guy, and that Dean was more of a jock, so they didn't really like each other at first, but they really bonded over music. He talked to Dean about Devo. They both love Devo. He tried to talk to him about Prince, but apparently Dean was not the biggest fan of Prince. I won't quote what Dean had to say about Prince at the time. Maybe he warmed up to him eventually. I don't know. And then in the Ween lore, they were greeted by the mighty demon god Bugnish, who deemed them Gene and Dean Ween, and the name stuck. But anyway, Dean was a big fan of like bands. Classic rock stuff was really up his alley, but he was also getting into bands like the Dead Milkmen, more punk stuff. And so he was bringing that, and they were really exchanging their love for music. So Ween was born soon after this with our heroes recording tapes at home. It starts this unique musical relationship. And this quote from Dean. So supposedly this was posted on on Mickey's Facebook account like several years ago, which another Ween fan posted on Reddit. But I had to read this quote, which was: "One Friday night, I had my father drop me off at the radio station with an agreement that he would pick me up in 4 hours. But I was lying to him and wasn't going to the radio station at all. I was going to my first show at City Gardens and had arranged a ride with one of the DJs. The band was Minutemen, and they were touring in support of Double Nickels on the Dime, their now legendary album. There were about 25 people at the show. And there were some opening bands, didn't remember who. He said the show literally changed his life and the direction his life would take. He says he met Mike Watt, D. Boone, George Hurley. They let him sit in their dressing room. He did an interview with them for his fanzine. They autographed his flyer, and he helped them load up their gear. He said they were the nicest, most down-to-earth band he'd ever met, and they had come to play. And I think this is important. He said the fact that this was a band on a mission was clear. These guys would play 7 nights a week and sleep on floors. They were completely accessible and doing it solely for the love of the music. And it was glaringly obvious in the way they carried themselves. To me, they were rock stars living the ultimate life, touring and playing music and barely making a living at it. To say it inspired me would be a massive understatement. Now, another one of my favorite bands is Minutemen, but I'm not just shoehorning that in. I think it's like essential to understand, like, first of all, there's sort of a shared sensibility between the Minutemen and Ween. There's a quirkiness and a reverence that you get with both of their music, but there's also this like, we're doing it in this really, this is not an attempt to be like achieve top 40 fame. We're going to do things our way. We're going to do it on our budget. That the big ethos of Minutemen is we jam Econo, which means that they would record things, on the cheap. They would do whatever they had to do, but it was very much a DIY project. One of the things that Dean always says is that in the early days, he was actually playing drums on a lot of the 4-track recordings that they were doing. But eventually the drum machine comes into play. And once the band relocated to a shack on a farm outside of New Hope, Pennsylvania, they started using the drum machine both when recording and playing live. And this version of Ween started out in the early 90s, lasted for a few years until the release of Chocolate and Cheese. For their early national releases, Ween released music through indie labels Twin Tone and Shimmy Disc. And then Ween, just by nature of what was going on in the early 90s with alternative music and grunge, and, artists like Beck out there, big labels start to get an appetite for very irreverent, out-of-the-box music. So Ween actually gets signed to Elektra and released several albums with the label, including 1994's Chocolate and Cheese, 1996's 12 Golden Country Greats, 1997 The Mollusk, often considered their masterpiece, in 2000's White Pepper. The thing that I find really interesting about Ween is this evolution and the way that they come into their own with that live band. Because, we're talking about live in Chicago. That live band is tight. You have Gene and Dean, who are like clearly really good at what they do. Gene's an amazing vocalist. Dean's an amazing guitarist, and I will definitely be geeking out about that in this episode. But you have Claude Coleman Jr. on drums, Clellan on the keys, and you have Dave Drywitz on bass. Really like an impressive lineup. White Pepper is an album of exceptions for Ween. It's the first album they spent a significant amount of time on in a proper studio. They did go to Nashville and use studio musicians for 12 Golden Country Greats, but it was a really quick session recorded in Mount Juliet. That kind of takes us up to where they are in this moment. They're never really releasing albums that are just like become huge commercial successes. They just have a steady stream of fans that grows and accumulates, and they build this really impressive live performance. I think that's really important to understand about White Pepper, because they decided to go into the studio and actually do the real full studio deal. They go up to Woodstock, New York, to an almost resort like setting. They have fully furnished studios, engineers doing things that Gene and Ween and Andrew Weiss used to do. We're going to record this as a band. Ween is a 5-piece unit, and we're going to record it that way. Not saying that they didn't use overdubs, and some of this was live, I'm sure, but they wanted to do it in a way that was like, okay, no, this is not us bringing it like, come on, Claude, you play on this song. It's like, we're a tight unit. And I think you can hear it, man. When you listen to White Pepper, it's tight. You hear how slick it is sounds. Some of that is Christopher Shaw and the setting that they're in, but really impressive what they do with this album. We'll get into why maybe they do this and some of the theories, but yeah, how familiar were you when you listened to this? Did White Pepper come to you first? What was your first like entryway into the Ween world?
Yeah, it was White Pepper, and it was you introducing it to me because I think you were working with Steve. You got introduced to Ween, and then you were like, "Man, this is great. You gotta check this out." And then I think it was that kind of thing where you hear their latest album, which was White Pepper, and I'm sure, Ween fans were telling us, "Oh gosh, this is good, but you've gotta check this out and this out and this out." So in the mid 90s, we're talking about when we're teenagers and going to the record store and you're flipping through all the CDs and vinyls, and I remember seeing Ween and being like, gosh, just the album art, they look weird and different. That Chocolate and Cheese album, that's iconic album art. If you don't know what I'm talking about, go just Google a picture immediately. I had this concept of this band, but didn't really know anything about them because they didn't have videos playing on MTV and no songs on the radio. Once I knew of Ween, then I've, familiarized myself with their other albums, almost immediately. But I'll say, without ruining anything coming up later, became my favorite album probably because back in 2000 we're still at that time where if you don't have a copy of it on disc, you might not have it. And I was slow in the technology coming around, but I do remember having White Pepper on CD and just wearing it out, and I didn't have any of the other albums, so that's probably why I have a great affinity for this album too, and it's my favorite Ween album.
Yeah, this was the last album that Ween was contractually obligated to do for Elektra. They usually just let Ween do their own thing. Apparently, the I don't know if it was the A&R guy or some whoever was at Elektra that was like, yes, let's sign Ween to a major label. Didn't stay around at Elektra that long, so Ween didn't really have that advocate. And this was, I don't think they knew it at the time that this would necessarily be their last album, but it was the last one on their contract. So there's always this like talk, like why did Ween sound less brown? Why did they go less weird with White Pepper? Did they take this approach because some people will say, well, the Mollis didn't sell as much as they thought it would, or as much as Chocolate and Cheese, even though like it's a lot of fans' favorite album of theirs. Did they want to take a more Elektra friendly approach and maybe try to extend their deal with Elektra? Or did Ween just record the album that they wanted to make at the time just because they simply wanted to try this approach? And you can't look at Ween's track record and say that they did anything other than just what they wanted to do. It doesn't make sense that this Ween would be like, let's try to be commercial. Let's try to be slick. I do think that they could have been an ambition to make an album that really drew heavily on the influences that they had when they were growing up, and to really look at bands like the Beatles or Pink Floyd, or I mean, there's some Steely Dan on this album. You can hear that influence. I don't know if that was how conscious that was at the time. I think that they were aware, even the name itself suggests that they're kind of swinging for something a little bit different. I feel like to say that this was like a commercial play or something to keep Elektra happy, it just doesn't really jive with the other stuff that we know about Ween. Just, there's no clear answer out there. So, I mean, all you can do is speculate. But regardless of all that, I love that Ween decided to make an album like this, just if nothing else to prove that they could. If they were doing this to show that, hey, we can make a timeless album. When we think about the things that came out in the year 2000, top of the charts. There's nothing that sounds like this. That what was grunge is become some strange new metal. Like it's lost. It's gone. Rock is in a really weird place. This is the year that Radiohead goes, electronic with Kid A. You have Yola Tango with, and then Nothing Turned Itself Inside Out that comes out that year. You have some interesting albums like Queens of the Stone Age are out there with Rated R. Elliott Smith has Figure Eight. Stankonia from Outkast comes out in the year 2000. But then, yeah, I mean, you've got like Oops, I Did It Again. You've got Linkin Park with Hybrid Theory. You have a lot of stuff coming out that is, White Pony by Deftones. This is stuff that's very different. It doesn't sound like White Pepper sounds like this could have come out in 1972 or in 1969 or in the year 2000 or in the year 2018. Like timeless is a word that we throw around a lot on this podcast, but I think we're picking albums that have that quality. So yeah, I mean, White Pepper is a very special, it's a notable shift. I think fans were worried. I think fans heard this and they thought, what are they doing? Are they shifting away from that earlier, more irreverent, eclectic approach? And surely enough, they weren't. The album, the official studio album that comes out after this is Quebec, and it kind of it's also very different from all the other Ween albums, and a very special album too. But it's clear that like this was just what Ween wanted to do at the time. And one of the other things too is I'm going to talk a lot in this about, hey, this sounds like this band, this sounds like the Beatles, this sounds like Steely Dan. I don't think that Ween goes in and is like, let's do a Beatles song, but I think it's what they're into at the time. And a quote from Gene says, if we sound like anybody, and this is from a 1995 interview with Spin, but I think they would say the same thing in later interviews or something similar. If we sound like anybody, it just comes out like that. We probably like to hang out with those people and work with them. We would never make fun of any of those people. We're not trying to parody music. We're not trying to destroy music. And this is Dean adding on to what Gene says. We're just trying to make good music. I think that kind of sums it up. Like, I just think this is a band just being like, yeah, we like this stuff and that's what we're going to do this time. Before we dive into the track list, I have a little story time. Little story time about Ween. This is the Pizza Hut story. And this is
I love
about,
story time. Thank you. I love story time.
you're going to like this one too, I think. Around the year 2000, around the time that this album came out, Pizza Hut was also working on something special, the Insider Pizza. Which, by the way, I loved. I love the Insider Pizza. If they had it, I'd probably buy it once a week. I love novelty pizzas. Like, I'm a big fan of it. And they hired one of the largest ad agencies in the United States to come up with like a hip, irreverent campaign for the Insider Pizza. And so the ad agency thinks, great, let's get Ween to do the music for it. Great idea. And so according to Ween, they recorded 6 different songs and kept submitting songs to the ad agency, who would submit them to Pizza Hut. And every day they get notes back. No, do this, try this again. And I guess around the time of the 6th song, and they got notes on that, they just decided, let's give Pizza Hut something special, which which led to just an incredible song that you can go on YouTube and find. But it's called it's called "Bitch, Where'd the Motherfucking Cheese Go At?" And not needless to say that we didn't get that commercial aired. The ad agency was fired, and thus so were Ween, and all plans were ditched. But I think that kind of sums up Ween's ethos pretty well. How do you feel about where'd the cheese go at?
I want some insider pizza.
I mean, it
Um,
worked, right?
yeah, yeah. I feel like um express the idea that Pizza Hut wanted people to know. And yeah, that's just brilliant. Like, I want to know who was in charge of the decision making where they're like, we need a musical artist to record this song. I know, Ween. They'll nail that.
They sure did. Go look it up. Go look Where'd the Cheese Go at.
Can I give you
Yeah.
something else to look up? Something I ran
Yes.
into that, and I didn't dig very far, so I'm sure anybody will quickly find it on YouTube. A video. It was like a local. It was like a local talk show for musicians. It looked like, I can't remember the name of the show, but they play Freedom of '76 on this
Yes.
show. And she before they play the song, she interviews them and asks about why they like to record on a 4 track. And Dean is like, well, it just forces you to write better songs. And so this was in 1993, and I just thought it was a super cool live performance. It's just Dean playing an electric guitar and Gene singing, and it's really cool. So go check that out.
Oh, definitely. That's a great clip. And man, what a great song too. I think it really kind of showcases like what Ween can do. Gene goes for it, man. Gene can hit those high notes. You hear it in live performances. You hear it on that. I mean, it's this local television show. They're clearly looking at these people like they brought them in from the zoo, and they're like, "What are we about to hear here?" And they're like, "Well, here you go." And Dean's got this really gnarly, distorted guitar, and who knows what, there aren't a lot of whole like crowd reaction shots while they're performing, so I don't really know how that was received. But just these two fearless guys, just doing their thing, and I think that's what, to see them in those early clips of like playing with the tape machine. I think that kind of like sums up like why people love Ween so much.
I was talking to some of my friends, friends that I have that I've not known for a long time, telling them about white pepper and asking them about Ween. And there's some people that are, I would say around our age, 10 years younger than us, somebody from like 30 to 55. I'd say there's lots of music fans in that range where Ween would have been prevalent in their prime time of searching out music, and they've never heard of Ween. People who
Mm.
like rock music, music fans, and they don't know anything about Ween. So it brings me joy to think that maybe somebody will listen to this who's never heard of Ween before and go out and search it out and become a fan, because I can't imagine anybody who is a serious fan of music that won't find some joy. And you may not like an album every single song start to finish, but you're going to find some gems on every one of their albums.
Absolutely. And white pepper, I mean, it's just packed. It's like packed to the gill. And we're going to start off with track number one. I mean, exactly where I'm at. This song opens with Claude Coleman Jr.'s drums. There's some sort of filter on Claude's drums. You can kind of hear it, the frequencies moving with the filter. Very trippy synths, just a lot of great layered synths on white pepper in general. But man, what an opening track this is. Let's begin with the past and front and all the things you don't care about. Diener's main solo is otherworldly. It's hard to tell whether this is like a reverse track, whether he did it and they flipped it, or whether Mickey's just getting weird with some pedals or effects or whatever. But it's just a lot of cool layered guitars later on in the song. Lyrically, it's like this song's serious. This album has a lot of seriousness in it. It's done in earnest. I love that about that. I think that's one of the reasons I love this album so much. It's very self-reflective, at times existential, especially on exactly where I'm at. More vulnerable than you might expect from a Ween song. But like I think of the lines, "I'm on stage, it's all an act. I'm really scared that I may fall back in the abstract." Just amazing. Great version of this on Live at Stubbs album too. But yeah, what an opening track. Exactly where I'm at.
Yeah. I feel like every album we've discussed so far, the first tracks are just always bangers. And I'm sure
Yeah.
I'm sure these artists have control over, the order of the tracks, how they appear on the album. And, why would you not want to just start with a banger immediately? that drum effect is so cool. Just immediately when the song starts, it's like, oh, okay, I know what this is. Because I have such affinity for this album, as soon as I start exactly where I'm at, I just immediately have a warm, fuzzy feeling. It's like, okay, this is comfortable. This is going to be really good. I'm going to get comfortable and soak all this in. I love the guitar solo in this song, which I feel like I could say that about almost every track on this album. Just has amazing guitar solos. Yeah, the lyrics on this song unbelievable. My favorite is your lips sound like two flaps of fat that go front and back, flappity flappity flap. I mean, immediately. So that's what I love about Ween is like this song starts and these great lyrics, and they soak you in, and you're like, man, this is serious. And then it's like your lips sound like two flaps of flap that go flappity flappity flap. It's like, okay, it's Ween. Okay.
Yeah, right. Don't take it too seriously. Like we're gonna, we're still here, dude. It's so true. It really knocks you over the head with the opening track, and that same the thing you're talking about, like that carries right into the second track. Like when Flutes of the Cheek comes on, you're like, this is track number two. Like how? What else do you guys have in store? The like weight of Flutes of the Chi. Just gets me every time. I get goosebumps when I hear this song. Even the lyrics, like they're a little elusive, a little abstract, but it just sounds so that, again, I'm going to use the word timeless a lot, but also just every band member making really cool choices in this song. Like everybody is choosing to do something interesting with their part. The band was playing this live as early as the mid 90s. Dave's bass on the album really, I think on the album version, this really ties everything together. The way that the bass kind of just weaves through everything else and keeps everything connected, especially when you combine it with what Claude's playing. This is really just an amazing rhythm section. And I love both guitar solos in the song. The first one's really straightforward. It has that beautiful kind of twang to it. And the second one is this really trippy, multi-layered, just definitely using something being played in reverse. It's a thing. It's Hendrixy that happens a lot on this album. And I'll talk in a little bit about how big of a fan Dean is of Hendrix and how much it influences playing. All this will end and begin again. I mean, lyrically, like very conceptual, very existential. I can't speak to what the flutes of the Chi are, but I'm compelled.
Yeah, I'm you sold me. I'm in. I love the synthesizer on this song. Synthesizers are prevalent on this song, and that guitar solo you were talking about, I find myself singing that, you know,
Mm,
when the song comes on, and I'll say this about a lot of songs that the guitar fills and solos are so prevalent and beautiful that I find myself singing the guitar solos,
yeah.
when I'm listening to the album. So yeah, Flutes of Chi, I'm always singing that bend in the on that guitar solo. And it's cool how it like kind of like growls or wails. Oh yeah, and this song has great harmonies. A lot of
Yes.
these tracks have great harmonies, and what Ween does is they a lot of times save the harmony for the last verse or the last chorus. They kind of tease you with some harmonies, and then they don't give you they don't give you what you really want until the end. So I like when bands do that.
Dude, I do too. You're so right. And there's some great vocal work on this album. And then it takes you, and you're like, okay, two opening songs, they'll probably take a break here. But no, it's even if you don't. No surprise that this was a single. I mean, this is probably a lot of people's favorite Ween song. This is a great song. I don't care what kind of music you like. You could not know Ween and just be like, I don't know who does this song, but it's an amazing song. Just a classic pop song. Catchy piano and staccato guitar stabs really make this very compelling from the jump. It's the verse is in 7/7/4 timing, which is super interesting, very Beatles esque. The song, like a lot of songs on this album, again, great melodic hook in the chorus and clever lyrics. It's also, this is crazy, but it's also really the first chorus that we have on the album so far. the first two songs that we talked about, they offer so much, and there's not even a real like vocal chorus in there. And this one has an amazing vocal chorus, just a real showcase of Ween's songwriting chops, I think. A great solo. I mean, again, we're going to be saying that a lot. Just like all of Dean's solos, you can hear the basic idea of this, even in the demo version that you can also find on YouTube. There's like white pepper demos that you can go find. A lot of the phrasing stays intact from that. Just a few more flourishes on the album. It's also one of Claude Coleman Jr.'s favorite performances of his own. The video, directed by Trey Parker and Matt Stone. Also, I know Ween has made an appearance on South Park as like animated, like they're playing, and you can like such kindred spirits, Trey and Matt and Gene and Dean. It's a pretty straightforward but really fun video, just with Gene and Dean just ecstatic through the whole song while the girls they brought to a bar are like hooking up with other people. Just always brings a smile to my face. And the lyrics are so funny, man. Please don't touch my phone book. My friends are getting pissed off. You wake them in the morning acting like a jerk off. I love this song.
And what's great about this song is those lyrics are sung like beautifully, like in a sweet,
Right.
innocent, like beautiful voice. I just love how Gene does that.
Yeah.
The irony of Ween, that's the irony of Ween to me is like singing some irreverent or vulgar or ridiculous lyrics just in like this beautiful choir boy voice, so mischievous and
Yeah.
ridiculous. Yeah, so even if you don't, here's a song that reminds us that if Ween wanted to be a band that just wrote beautiful pop songs, they have the ability to be that band. I love this song. There's two or three on this album that I think are like this, just a beautiful love song that could have been written by any of the great songwriters in history, and yeah, just a beautiful song.
I totally agree. I mean, this could be a Lennon McCartney song. That's how good it is. And it's the case of a lot of songs on this album. Bananas in Blow, though. I mean, of all the influences that Wiener going to pull from, I did not expect like to get Jimmy Buffett vibes when I first heard this album. And it starts off, and you're like, "What is going on here?" The band once said in the '90s that if they ever use backup singers, that they've sold out. And a lot of people think that that's like a wink and a nod to what they're doing here on this album. I just have a feeling that Wayne thought it would sound good and decided to have backup singers on the track. I mean, they'd had the Jordanaires on 12 Golden Country Greats, but yeah, again, Diener just tearing off an acoustic solo that just shows some range. These like rapid fire bursts in the solo of Bananas and Blow, but also very melodic. Like it's another one that you can kind of sing that you want to sing it. It's just a talent of his. Song's clever, well written, a little cheeky, a lot cheeky. Um, it's just fun. Just Bananas and Blow. I think it's sort of like, okay, we've hit you with these three. Now let's settle in and have some Bananas and Blow.
It was a hot and sunny Tennessee morning in June 2002 at the first ever Bonnaroo Music Festival. Roughly 10 young adults sat in a circle discussing the must see events on the schedule for the day, one of which was Ween on the main stage. An impromptu jam broke out when someone started playing Bananas and Blow on their acoustic. The jam was so tasty and moving that a field reporter and a cameraman from Channel 5 Nashville News popped up out of nowhere and practically begged the group to perform the song again for the camera that may be aired later on a news telecast. You and I participated in that jam that still lives on in Bonnaroo Music Festival folklore to this day. That was about 22 years ago. Do you remember that?
I forgot all about that. Wow, dude, nice pull. That was crazy.
Yeah, how
My
fun
God,
was
that could have
that?
been Steve. Like that could
It
have been Steve playing guitar in that.
it probably was. Yeah, there was yeah, I think it was Steve probably. I that's a memory burned into my brain. It was like nobody said, let's do this. It just kind of happened and we're all singing along and just, just having a big time. And I'm like, man, this is definitely a cool moment. And then, later on we saw Ween on the main stage, which we discussed anyway. But yeah, when I uh, got back into this album for our discussion today, the first thing I heard was Grateful Dead. This song just totally reminds me
Ooh.
something off like Shakedown Street. It sounds like early 70s Grateful Dead to me, especially with the female background singers. But yeah, gosh, this song is so cool. And I feel like this is one of those Ween songs where, you know, like you said about the last song, just you don't even know who it is and it doesn't matter. It's just a super cool song.
I forgot. Wow, you kind of blew my mind. I forgot all about that. Like, it's like, wow, did that really happen? And yeah, that did happen. And then it's great because you get this bananas and blow. I love the Grateful Dead reference too. And right after that, we go straight into Stroker Ace. And just when you think the band is all Jimmy Buffett, they bust out Motorhead, and don't forget that we're still Ween. I love it. I love like so many versatile bands we like. Ween has I keep saying gears, like there's so many different types of gears. And this one is the punch you in the face gear. That Ween is very true to the Ween ethos. And so here, I'm just going to take a minute and geek out about Dean. If Dean Ween were a boxer, he would be a brawler. He would be Mike Tyson. Okay, he would be Sonny Liston. He's not trying to go into a ring and win on points or style like a Klitschko or a Lennox Lewis. Like, he's going in there to smash your face. To appreciate what Dean is capable of, you have to go watch some live Ween clips. His guitar sound, like I mean, this is true on a lot of live things that you can find of Ween, but by the time that they're doing live in Chicago, I mean, Gene, sometimes Gene plays guitar too, but when it's just Mickey and he's playing, it's huge. That one guitar just fills up a venue. Dean is definitely a Strat guy. That red Stratocaster is sort of his signature. Apparently, he has a pretty big guitar collection, but with Ween, it's almost always a Strat, especially like by the time that you're getting into this era of Ween. He was always a big classic rock fan, idolized Hendrix, and so he gravitated toward the Strat. The Strat was what Hendrix played. Hendrix played a white Strat, and Dean's is red. But he's mostly kept a pretty tight pedal board throughout the years with a wah pedal, a phase pedal. There's a Boss RE20 Echo that he plays that you can find out a lot about. Like, you can find pictures of Dean's pedal board. But yeah, just about that red Strat. It's a 1962 Dakota Red Stratocaster with a slab board neck. He bought it on an early Ween tour in LA for around $1,600. That might sound like a lot. I don't know if anyone listening or watching doesn't know, like, that's a steal for that guitar in today's money. Like, today, that guitar would be worth so much more money. Not just because Dean played it, but just because it's a 1962 Strat. But yeah, it's what you hear on albums. It's what you hear on live shows. He replaced parts over the years. And then in 2008, Fender reached out. They eventually endorsed him. They took his guitar to make a replica. It took a few months because he couldn't get a backup that was suitable. So if he'd break a string, he'd have to play whatever the backup guitar there was, would that really never really sounded the same or felt the same. But they finally sent him a guitar, made a replica, and he said it's the closest replacement guitar that he could use as a backup. Also, just as a side note, I found out that he used a 1966 Fender Jazzmaster to record Freedom of 76, a tutorial on YouTube that he has for that song, which is super cool. But I'm not done yet. In addition to all the pedals that I mentioned, sometimes you'll see you'll see a whammy pedal on there, an EHX synth pedal. So he will expand his lineup a little bit there. His amp is often you can see it cited as a Mesa Boogie triple rectifier into 4x12 cabinets, which is where most of his distortion comes from. The dirt comes from those amps. I've also read that he uses a Mesa Boogie dual rectifier, trimmer reverb heads into 412 cabinets. Sometimes he uses the Mesa Mark IV in the studio. That was geeky, and I apologize for everybody who doesn't know what any of that means, but it's important for those of us who care. With the Dean Ween group, you see Dean playing a lot of different guitars, including Les Paul, Butterscotch Blonde Telly, in earlier Ween videos, like the one that you're talking about, where they're on that local television channel. And I guess in Philly, he's playing a Music Master. At first, I was convinced it was a Mustang, but apparently it's just a Music Master with somebody added a pickup in there. This is great. Dean told Matt Sweeney on Guitar Moves, which is just like this YouTube series that you can watch. That he essentially has two different styles of playing. He's a pretty humble guy when he talks about it, because I mean the man's a beast. But he says that he has two different approaches. One is Blue Sky by the Allman Brothers, which is the happy mode and sort of a happier major pentatonic, and the other one is Maggot Brain by Funkadelic, which is the angry mode. So he has two modes. He also has some really good advice on how to place your guitar in relation to your crotch in order to be cool. You can either play it up here like Harrison, or you got to go below the crotch. But in between's not cool. So just definitely recommend anybody who's interested to go watch that. But Dean is capable of playing in so many different styles, from jazz to country to metal. He has some serious chops. He just really excels at playing loud and fast, which is why he's the Mike Tyson of guitar players. So yeah, sorry for the tangent there, but any thoughts on Stroker Ace?
It's one of those tracks that Ween loves to put on an album where it's like, okay, name the track that doesn't belong with the rest. This one this one stands out on this album. It's like, by far the fastest and aggressive song, and they're like yelling, yelling spoken word lyrics, so yeah, this one's different. I love it because with Ween and a lot of the bands we like, if they pull something out of left field and it's not your cup of tea, it's going to be over in 2 minutes. So
Mm.
don't get bent out of shape. But yeah, just to comment on Dean's guitar playing, I love watching him play guitar on that live in Chicago when he plays Buckingham Green. There's one
Oh yeah.
part where he's like playing the guitar like inches off the ground. I'm assuming either to achieve some sound and feedback or to just look super cool after what you just said. That he said maybe he's just trying to look super cool. Either way, it's working.
Dude, there's a really good so there's like a whole lane in YouTube of like reaction videos to Ween songs, because people don't know them that well. But one of my favorites is somebody reacting to that, and a lot of other songs. But Michael Palmisano, he's a guitar teacher, and he just is geeking out about Dean and the playing on that song. He does Voodoo Lady. He does Transdermal Celebration. He's a fun dude to watch. They know how to put on a show, and they know how to really nail it, and then to also look the part. But then, so from Stroker Ace, after we've gone Bananas and Blow to Stroker Ace, now we go into Ice Castles. I freaking love Ice Castles. Dean wrote on a ukulele. There's actually a YouTube video where Dean shows how to play this on a guitar. The song itself is like very haunting. There's this mellotron kind of out of tune thing. It's like what you hear on a lot of Beatles albums, especially around like Sgt. Pepper and all of that. So that's going on. There's maybe a harpsichord in there. But yeah, for all I know, Dean didn't need any of McClellan's help on this, or maybe he was very involved in shaping it into what it was on the album. But like most Wing songs, this sounds different. It's just amazing live. Are you with me on Ice Castles? I mean, like as far as instrumental tracks on albums go, like this is one of my all-time favorites.
Yeah, yeah, I can go with you on this one. That's the thing. It's like Stroker Ace and Ice Castles by themselves is almost like judging it or appreciating it by itself is kind of bizarre. But then when you put it in an album, it's like so different. It's like, whoa, this is interesting. And even if it takes you to a place of absurdity or just unfamiliarity, it's interesting. And
Yeah.
so, I mean, I really like this. There's very few things that Ween does that I can't go down that road with them, but a really cool song.
And I always wonder, like with this one, part of me was like, should I try to track down Glenn McClellan and ask him what was what he did on the song. Then after I figured out how involved Dean was in the creation of it, I didn't. Also, like I sometimes get mixed up. So if you hear me say Clive McClellan, it's because I've heard Gene say Clive McClellan. The guy's name's Glenn McClellan. If you hear me say Jimmy Wilson Sr., I'm talking about Claude Coleman Jr. They have this crazy thing where they just call people by different names. Apparently, like everyone's Jim. Apparently, in the Ween world, like they just call everybody Jim, and Jimmy Wilson especially. But Claude, the drummer, was known as Jimmy Wilson Sr., which I think is really a distinction. But then we go into Back to Base. I mean, you and I have talked a little bit about this song. Like the first two tracks on this album, very lush psychedelic track. I love the breakdown with that high pitched synth. It's even in the demo version. Again, I thought that's got to be Glenn McClellan doing the thing, and maybe that's where it originated. I don't know, but it's in the demo. It just has such a '70s like prog rock feel. This acoustic guitar sounds great on this song. Just playing those riffs. There's some sort of slide that comes in. I don't think it's like a lap steel necessarily. It could be. It could just be a steel. It could just be a slide guitar coming in. I'm a sucker for that sound. So I think this song is very strong, like Pink Floyd vibes here. It sounds very Dark Side of the Moonish. The spaciness, the vocals, the guitars, the synths, just very dark side era Floyd sounding to me. Apparently, Basin's a small town or hamlet located in western New York.
Gosh, I love this song. You described it very well. I love how Gene Ween does different things with his voices on different songs. It's just so interesting. And then, on this song, I don't know if it's a vocal effect that adds spaciness to his voice or like stretches it out or slows it down or if he's just manipulating it when he sings. Yeah, this song is just so cool, and it's when it starts out, it kind of starts quirky and you're like, okay, where are we going here? Is this weird? And then it just immediately takes you off on a journey and into a new place. And like you said, I like the synthesizers give you this big, giant, full, lush sound. I love that.
You're right, because especially in early Ween, there's a lot of voice modulation going up. They're speeding things up, they're slowing it down, they're running it through different modulators. But like you can hear it in live. Like Gene, just like Aaron Freeman has a way of singing like in the back of his throat or whatever. But like he really does mess with it. I'm like you. I don't quite know what's going on there. I think it's probably just him, but it wouldn't surprise me if they use modulation because they do it so often on other albums. It takes it into one of my favorites on the album, which is The Grove. It's a great psychedelic rock song. It sounds like they're running Aaron's vocals through a Leslie cabinet or just finding some sort of effect that mimics like a Leslie speaker. It's something you hear some on Beatles songs, just a lot of different bands. But the demo of this. I found this. I thought it was interesting too. It's still trippy, but it's just not quite as big as the final version that you hear on White Pepper. But man, those big crunchy, thick guitars are the backbone of the song. Claude's drums, they sound huge. This song gets me amped every time I hear it. I love The Grove.
Yeah, when I was preparing for our discussion, I thought, I wouldn't be surprised if this is Seth's favorite song on the album. And I just love the big sound, as soon as it comes in, and then the psychedelic rock guitar solos. It just sounds huge, kind of like that mega 70s anthem rock. I love that sound. I love when Ween goes down this lane because they're really good at this. This is one of Ween's signature styles and sounds, this giant anthem 70s rock.
Absolutely. It does it has like Buckingham Green, Transdermal Celebration, like those kind of fit into the same sort of lane as this
Yes.
song as well. Yeah. Dude, I love it. It's so much. And then it takes you into yet another left turn into Pandy Fackler.
I
So
love this song.
which, this song's great, man. Supposedly Dean Ween said the idea for this came to him in a dream. I could see that. There is sort of a dreamlike quality to parts of the song. I mean, I get strong Steely Dan vibes from this song too. And you when you read like message boards and stuff, you can see that that's a pretty much consensus. A lot of people get that Steely Dan vibe. There's also sort of a country swing type of feel toward the end of it too, kind of reminiscent of other jazzy, quirky songs that that Ween will do. I think of like Mr. Richard Smoker. The bass is super cool on this song. Dean's high pitched guitar part is so cool. Penny Fackler, like I don't know what planet this comes from, but it's so good.
When I hear this song, I almost think that that high pitched guitar riff was probably the first thing written. I almost feel like everything evolved around, that kind of little feel, because that little feel right there almost kind of sets the whole style of this song. I love that you brought up Steely Dan. I would have never thought of that, but I feel that way about a lot of Steely Dan songs. It's like almost the guitar fills are almost like so cool that you imagine that maybe the songwriter first came up with that feel and was like, "Oh, that is awesome. Let me write a song. Let me write a song using that." So I have no idea. I'm just kind of guessing, and I was curious what you thought about that.
Dude, it makes total sense. I do think it's so distinct. It's hard to imagine that coming later. Like it's hard to imagine like somebody being like, "Here's the thing, here's the song," and then they go in and it's like, "Now let me add this little high pitched thing on there." But the other thing that's so distinct too is just that opening riff, the one that keeps recurring to the song. Like it's so like I just don't know I don't know who writes that. Like I don't know
Right.
who thinks like that, whose mind works in a way that would write like the main vibe of Pandy Fackler. Like it's
Right.
even the name, like even Pandy Fackler and the lyrics to this song, it's insane. And it has there's so many cool things and funny things about this song, but it's also like just really well executed, like beautifully done. This could be a joke song. This could be a throwaway, but they like that. I don't think that Ween thinks in terms of joke songs. I think that they have things that are funny, but it's like they're deadly serious, but they're also, they know what they're doing too. You know what I
Right.
mean?
It's yeah, it's
Yeah.
like here's how we're going to get this idea across, because the idea is funny. So let's do it in that way, but in no way is the song itself a joke or funny. And then what's so cool is when it starts out so silly and ridiculous where you're maybe laughing out loud, then when it gets to the breakdown, it's like, "Oh my gosh." Like the second half of this song, that's all instruments, is just
Yeah.
so good and so cool. I love this song. And I said earlier that I kind of forgot about Ween. I bet I didn't listen to Ween, because you can you can be out in the world and taking everything in and there's not any Ween out there. I just, for whatever reason, just kind of forgot about Ween. As soon as I bring up White Pepper, Pandy Fackler, it's like, "Oh, yeah, Pandy Fackler." I mean, that was one of the first songs that I thought of on this
Yeah.
album, because it is, I mean, just the name itself is so hilarious. And so Micah, my 4-year-old, has a stuffed panda bear, and he calls it Pandy. And so now, since I've gotten into White Pepper the last couple weeks, now Pandy has a last name, and it is Fackler.
Yes, yes. I encourage the world to name their children stuffed animals after Ween songs. The world would be a better place if that happened. God, that's such a good song, and you're so right. The way that when it kicks up and it's the instrumental thing, I mean, it is tight. I think that's why the Steely Dan references come up, is because like Steely Dan were notorious for like being really obsessive about tightness in their sound, and they would bring in different bands all the time, but they would obsess about like is the bass locking in with the kick drum and all of these things. They were very meticulous, and when you hear the back half of Pandy Fackler, you do get that sort of like, man, this is just they really crush it. And then it goes into a stretch. The last three songs on this album, I think, are like, I think we're really firmly in Beatles territory throughout the rest of this thing. Stay Forever it comes next. Just heavy Beatles influence. The hook in this song is amazing. Like when he sings, "Do you feel the same way?" Man, what a hook that is. It's just so just showcases again how great of a songwriter that Gene and that Dean, how good they are. You get that pedal steel guitar. You know how I feel about that. Supposedly played by Stu Basore. I hope I'm pronouncing that right, from the Shit Creek Boys lineup that played on the live Toronto show. One of my favorite live Ween albums. I don't think he played on 12 Year Old Country Greats, but even the stripped down version of Stay Forever that you hear on like the demos, if you go on YouTube and listen to it, like it still has the core essence of this song and it still sounds great, because a great song is a great song even if you strip away all of the like lushness of it. I think Stay Forever is a good example of that. It's one of the things I love about this song, and it's just true of White Pepper in general. It's like I said earlier, I mean, it's how earnest and sincere this song is. Ween, I think you could misread them as being a uber cynical band, and this album in particular there a lot of that cynicism isn't there, and just how sincere Stay Forever is, I think. And really the last stretch of this album, I think that's true across the board. But yeah, Stay Forever is another sort of classic, just timeless song, right?
Yeah, yeah, it's kinda in the category with Even If You Don't. I just feel like it's a beautiful pop song that if Ween just wanted to write top 40 hits, that they could do that. The lyrics are, like you said, vulnerable, and I think here's another song where somebody could just hear this song for the first time and, with no context, just think, well, this is a beautiful pop song, a timeless classic love song. Always been one of my favorites. That hook you were talking about, there's a harmony on that hook too that just makes it just
Yeah,
velvety, rich, and sweet. Yeah, I
yeah.
love this song.
That's so good. And then it takes us to Falling Out. Again, heavy, like mid Beatles influence here. It's like that real Rubber Soul Revolver vibe. I really hear Run for Your Life a lot when I hear this song. And I think of like a close Beatles song to mimic it. But honestly, Falling Out, it might even trumpet. Those harmonies, the harmonies in Falling Out, they sound like Paul McCartney's harmonies. You could play this song for so many different types of listeners, and it would immediately strike a chord. I think it's yet another one of my favorites on this album, and an album that's just stacked of amazing, well written songs.
Yeah, this I feel like is, you were talking about like slick, clever songs. I feel like this is slick, clever songwriting, not in a way like we need to be for it to be good. To me, Falling Out to me is almost like a country western song. I feel like this is a song where there would be lots of pop artists today who would love to like get their hands on this song and be like, "Ooh, I want to do that in my version." You know what I mean? Because it's a timeless, cool song. Nobody will listen to this song and be like, No, I don't think that works." Like it is just, it's the lyrics are awesome. The
Yeah.
subject of the song is really cool, and the subject of the song matches the mood of the song. You get that,
Mm-hmm.
the I imagine country westerns vibe when I hear this, like a saloon, and like two guys are about to go have a what do you call it when they like walk 10 steps away from each other and turn around and fire. That's when I
Yeah.
see, that's kind of like where it takes me when I hear this song. So yeah, this is one of my favorites on this album.
Yeah, me too. It's and the solo again. It's just kind of something. I mean, it's really just Dean playing around in like an F sharp minor pentatonic, but it's so the way that he does it, it just fits so well and it elevates the song. Just like that's what he does, and that's how he really elevates the material. Is he takes something that's really good and he adds a whole other dimension to it by just picking the right notes. Like he's just got a great ear for writing memorable solos, and it's one of the more memorables for me on the album.
All right, now we're at She's Your Baby. Man, the harmonies on this are so good. Just such a beautiful song to end this album. Great lyrics. The demo has like almost an Elliott Smith vibe. I doubt like Elliott Smith was like an influence on Ween at all. It's just anytime you have an acoustic guitar with like a couple vocals layered on top of each other, it has that sound. And the final record, I think, really evokes the Beatles. But I love the lyrics on this song. Just the opening line: Jenny came back from the stand smiling with the writing of Kafka in hand and a bunny in a can slipping and sliding. You feel yourself asking her, why would you want me to try? The cadence of the lyrics, everything about this, it's a really well crafted song. It lulls you out of the album. Some albums end with a bang, some kind of like ease you out. This is definitely the latter, but yeah, just a great way to end the album, and another reminder that these guys are next level songwriters.
This is one of my favorite songs on the album because I've been singing it all day long, probably to where my wife is annoyed. I've just been whistling that hook over and over again. I feel like this is, goes with Even If You Don't and Stay Forever, just a serious, okay, this is Ween, like putting down the goofy, laying the goofiness down and like strapping up their, songwriting prowess and just gonna, write a melancholy, gut wrenching, beautiful song. I was reading the lyrics on, like, I don't know if it's the second verse or what. I don't know if you feel this way, but I don't know. There's something almost sounded like maybe dealing with addiction or talking about
Mm.
using drugs or something. But I don't know. The lyrics are beautiful and interesting. I really like this song.
Yeah, there's always this undercurrent with a lot of Ween's lyrics. I think it's especially true on Quebec, where you hear them kind of wrestling with their demons, and I think that the party it can turn, when you're in a band for that long. And at first, it's all fun and games, and you're having a good time. But then things start to take a turn to a darker place. I think their music can kind of reflect that, and it wouldn't surprise me if there's a reference to that in "She's Your Baby." It's a good point. When you look at this at the post White Pepper career of Ween, Ween does move to a more indie approach with their next album. I mean, like literally indie, because they don't stay with Elektra. It's in Quebec is a darker and stranger album. Dean has called it a very negative album because all of their albums are sort of snapshots of where they are. But it's released on Sanctuary Records. The album received so much love from the fan base. And it's a little browner too. I do think that Quebec is also an achievement, and I think that it's a really special album. So I mean, they still have a lot of good stuff, and then of course all the live stuff that we're talking about and that run that they go on. I mean, they become such a great live band. I think they already are in 2000, but it just keeps getting better and better throughout the years. And of course, if there were any fans concerned that like White Pepper was going to be a deviation, that it was permanent, it wasn't. It was just something that we wanted to do with White Pepper, and they do in fact have more echoes of the Ween of old with future releases. Are you ready, man? Are you ready for some rapid fire questions?
I'm so ready. It's ridiculous.
So of course we're going to open up with, who are Ween's contemporaries?
I said fish and
Mm,
cake. And then as you were talking, I was also thinking like how they have these like crazy loyal fan bases, which Fish obviously is one of those widespread panic maybe for
mm.
crazy loyal fan bases. Who do you think are Ween's contemporaries?
It's interesting that you said Fish, because Fish starts to cover "Roses Are Free," and that brings a lot of Fish fans into the Ween fold. And I found this interview from '98 where they ask Ween about Fish, and they're like nice guys, and Gene especially is like, they're really boring. Um, Mickey's a lot nicer. Mickey's just like, I don't know their music. I've heard like one song, but they're really nice guys. I talked to Trey on the phone, and the interviewer's like, I've talked to Trey, and he's a big fan of Daryl's work. And Gene's like, yeah, they're nice guys. It's real boring. So it's so funny that there's like this cross pollination between these two bands. But I mean, the loyalty of the fan base, the ability to improvise and really bring something unique every night, I think is reminiscent of Fish. So for me, I have Beck, which this is going to become like, this should just be the question. It's just like, besides Beck, who are the band contemporaries? Because we just say it in every episode, or at least I do. Anyway, two that came to mind. I think that one, and like Les Claypool's definitely a fan, a friend of Dean, and they've played together. But I think Primus kind of belongs in the conversation as far as Ween's contemporaries go. I don't know if musically there's a ton of connection, but I do think that like the Flaming Lips, uh, To me, I can hear a little bit like some of the psychedelic aspects of their music were kind of reminiscent. So Beck, Promise, and Flaming Lips
How
were the
about
three that I had.
the Eels?
Oh, the Eels, yeah, and they kind of
That
came up
would
from during Cake too. I mean, that's like another like these are bands that are thinking outside the box that are doing interesting things. And again, the psychedelic thing, not afraid to go there, right?
yeah, I thought of Cake for like the not being scared to play different genres.
Hmm.
That's why I thought of Cake.
Do you have a favorite lyric on the album?
Well, look at yourself. Your lips are like two flaps of fat. They go front and back and flappity flappity flap.
It's funny, man. I feel like every time we've done one of these, mine is always from the first song on the album. But I think it's just because of how powerful some of these songs are. But like, let's begin with the past and front, and all the things you really don't care about. You'll be exactly where I'm at. I could really read the entire lyrics for that whole song, and it would probably be my favorite lyric on the album. What's your favorite song on the album?
Flutes of Chi.
Love it, and you're right. Going with the Grobe, you nailed it. Um,
Yes.
is okay for you. Is this the band's peak? Is White Pepper Ween's peak?
Yes. I'm sure a lot of diehard Ween fans would disagree, but I'm not a diehard Ween fan. I like Ween a lot, but Ween's, not my favorite band. So that's I like White Pepper the best, probably because, like I mentioned earlier, it was how I was introduced to Ween, and then I had a copy of it that I listened to all the time, so I just became so familiar with it. But even today, when I go back, I mean, I love the Mollusk. I still think I like White Pepper better, just because there's just, I mean, like you said, I mean, there's just such good songs on this album.
It's kind of a perfect album. It's hard to deny that. And for that reason, I was the same. I went into this with the mentality that I do think that this is their peak because of everything that's come before it. This is a culmination of it. And then I changed my mind last minute, and I think that the I'm gonna kind of go with like 2003 era Ween because that's when they not only put out Quebec, but it's when they recorded live in Chicago. So like I think either argument, you could make the argument really either way, but I'm going to go with 2003. Do you have an ideal setting activity for listening to this album?
Okay, so you changed the name of the first question. For this question, for me, it says it should be other than lying very still in the dark. What is the best setting to listen to this album? So I put I put the setting should be you and some people you care about actively listening to this song in a beautiful setting in the great outdoors.
This is a party record, right?
It
Like,
is.
sure, there might be some slower moments, like, she's your baby. But man, this is such a joyous album that I think it works so well in the context of a bunch of people together. So we're both have the same mindset there. This is something you can throw on and it's going to make a lot of people happy. Is there a song on this album that you would use to introduce Ween? Like you're gonna pick somebody and you're like, okay, what's the thing you're gonna give them that's gonna get them intrigued and want to listen to more Ween?
I really feel like you could almost choose any song off this album, but I chose The
Yeah.
Grove. I chose The Grove
Mm.
because of what I said earlier is I feel like this is the Ween style that they're really good at, and they have several songs in this style. So I feel like this would be a good introduction of this is what Ween is.
I'm going to go with even though I don't think it's that representative of the rest of their work, it's just a sneaky way drug that's going to get somebody hooked and they're going to come back for more and they're going to find all of the other things that Ween can offer. So if this album was a movie, which movie would it be?
I came up with Silver Linings Playbook.
Oh, okay. Oh, I like that one.
What's a beautiful movie, but it's also quirky and strange and weird. I mean, not super weird, but just like so I just tried to think of what's a bit of a quirky movie, but it's also beautiful and powerful and can stand in line with the classics.
Dude, that's so good. God, I think I prefer your answer. I This is a hard question to answer. I came up with this, and now like every time I have to think about it, it hurts my brain. And I'm going with David Lynch's The Straight Story. David Lynch is known for doing like really wild and occasionally challenging movies, and they're usually just like some people are going to like them and some people are going to hate them. But The Straight Story is kind of his. I don't even think he was. Again, I don't think it was like, oh, I'm going to be commercial. He was just like, I'm going to tell a simple story, and it's not going to be full of all the David Lynch tricks, devices that he would normally use. So that's my answer. But I really like Silver Linings Playbook. If Ween, if Ween were a sports team, boy, I thought about this one a lot. If Ween were a sports team, who would they be?
Oh gosh. You know what? I forgot that we added this question. So you need to go first because I have not thought about this at all.
It's going to be hard to beat, man. I did my research here and I thought about this a lot. So at first, my first instinct was, okay, I was thinking, okay, I'm going to go with the 2001 76ers. I mean, they were fun to watch. They were an exciting team. I thought that, but then I changed my mind because I know that Dean has like sort of a hockey connection, but I also wanted a team that was a little bit more rough and tumble. And I landed on the answer to this question, which is the Broad Street Bullies. It was a Flyers team from the 70s. They were at their peak from 73 to 76. The Philadelphia Flyers, that team won back-to-back Stanley Cups in 74 and 75. Bobby Clark was the captain. Dave the Hammer Schultz. Bernie Parent was the goalie. One of the reasons that I liked it, not only were they very accomplished in Philly, you have that connection, but they also led the league in penalty minutes, and they were known for fighting as much as being skilled players. And not that Ween's like a fighting, not like that they're reputed to be in a bunch of fistfights or anything, but their music can be very like it's going to take your head off. So I did a few deep dives and came up with the Broad Street Bully Philadelphia Flyers team.
I love that. That's great. I can't even give one. We should just move on.
Okay. Well, our last rapid fire question here. What band would you like to hear cover this album?
I gave this some thought and I'm going with Radiohead.
Ooh.
I want to hear
I would pay money to hear that.
I want to hear Johnny Greenwood try to uh, come up with all those synth sounds, and I want to hear Ed O'Brien banging out those, or Johnny. I mean, whichever one wants to. I want to hear them bang out some Dean Ween guitar solos.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Hear Tom sing the falsetto. Absolutely, I love it. So if it like time's an issue and we can span time and space, I want to hear the Beatles do this album. I think this would be a
Oh
great Beatles
gosh.
album. I would love to hear it. I mean, in the modern day, I'd like to hear Tame Impala take a crack at this album.
Okay.
I don't know why. I think it's the psychedelic thing that gets me. I think that they could do some cool stuff with something like Back to Basin. I think Kevin Parker would do some cool stuff there. So those I kind of I'm cheating by giving two answers,
I
but
like
yeah,
both
those are my
answers.
answers.
Gosh, I'm see, I don't think outside the box enough. I've never thought, oh, I could get some dead people to play this album.
And that's it. That takes us to the end of rapid fire questions and to the end of the episode. I came to the conclusion when I listened to this. This is one of my favorite albums of all time. I generally think throwing around terms like this is the greatest or this is one of the best doesn't really make sense because music's so subjective. It's all very personal. But I genuinely think that this album offers so much to so many different types of listeners. I genuinely believe it's one of the greatest albums ever made. And the funny thing is, I'm not even entirely sure it's my favorite Ween album. Like I think it is, but it may not even be my favorite Ween album. But I think that from just like stepping outside of the Ween verse, I think that the Weeniverse, that sounds better. Stepping outside of that, like I just think this is such a classic album. Like this belongs in the pantheon of great albums. When you talk about like, I mean, I'm talking Abbey Road, I'm talking Dark Side of the Moon. I think this belongs in the conversation. That's how passionate I've been about that album, and that I've become as I listened to it more and I did a deep dive in preparation. Yeah. Any parting thoughts about Ween, about White Pepper that you'd like to share?
When you talk about great albums, one of the things that we always talk about is the test of time. And if you asked me in 2003, 2004, 2005, where this album ranked on my favorite albums, I would say it's way up there. Like immediately, it didn't take, very long for me to just say, yes, this is one of my favorites of all time. And then for some reason, somehow I just forgot about it and didn't listen to it for a while.
Hmm.
And then when I went back to it after not listening to it for 10 or 15 years, it's just as good or better. When an album has that quality, that's how you know it is really good because, I mean, let's face it, we grow as people and we change. And, if you can go back to something and it's still just as good or better than it was when you first loved it, then you know how it is. And I'm so glad that you started the way you did in talking about this album and then asked me if I felt the same way because I definitely do. And I'm sure there's tons of stuff out there that I have no concept of that is just amazing, and somebody's out there that's been enjoying it for 15 years and I just don't even know it exists. But I feel like this is one of those gems that a lot of people don't even know it exists, and it belongs into the annals of time or whatever, however that's said. This is, something that belongs in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, and something that could stand up with anything. So yeah, I'm so glad we talked about it today. I feel even more passionate about it now after talking about it for an hour and a half or however long we've been going.
Dude, I love it. This has been a blast, and it's been so much fun in the Ween world. I want to revisit it. I don't want this to be the end of it. It's been too much fun. I look. I'm going to go ahead and say someday you're going to be hearing me lobbying for a live in Chicago deep dive,
We're
just so
definitely
we can geek out
discussing the
about Ween again.
mollusk. We're definitely discussing the
Yes, the
mollusk.
mollusk. I
So
mean, you think
stay
about all the
tuned.
stuff to do. Stay tuned for more Ween because this band, the world needs to know. More people need to know about Ween. Buddy, it's been a blast. I've enjoyed it so much. And yeah, we'll be back again. Hey, if you're into what we're doing here, help us out. Uh, Subscribe to the channel. If you're on YouTube, just all the things like the video, just show us some love and we're going to keep doing our thing. But yeah, we'll talk to you again soon and have a good one, buddy. It's been a pleasure.
All right, buddy. I've had a blast.